Let's say. Good evening, and welcome to another installment of In Conversations. This time, we're doing a conversation on cataloging emotions, a show curated by me and the artwork produced by Othello de Souza Heartly.
Hello.
The first few minutes will be a conversation surrounding the topics featured in the show, namely just bringing things up from the title and also looking up at the artworks in no particular order. So this is a very informal chat. At one point, when we're done with our little conversation, we're going to admit you guys questions. This is a very, how can I put it? It's a very, what's the word that I'm looking for?
Informal conversation?
It's conversation. It's a very informal chat. So feel comfortable to reach out to us during the course of this recording. Let me just start with Othello.
Okay.
And ask him the following question. How are you feeling currently?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling positive. Glad that I had this show in this moment that things about to go into possibly a lockdown. So I'm glad that this show happened.
I'm going to give you guys a little bit of an idea of how we started off this collaboration. Cataloging Emotions began a year ago in the back of another show that we both did.
Yes.
And we've been doing studio visits and doing a whole set of conversations regarding, how can I put it? Regarding curation and the relationship between an artist and his work. And Cataloging Emotions was born out of primarily a drive to show both the photography, the film, and the paintings. And I've realized Othello has also got a lot more work that we could have shown in the studio, because he's been doing some really interesting work with figurative as well that we could have added. But in this case, it was mostly about creating a bridge between the well-known work in the series I Am and in the series Masculinity, and bridging that with the Studies series, which is a series loosely based on memory, on the body, and on architecture. So the way that I like to see the show is as follows. It is almost a way of giving life to Othello's sort of creative universe.
Yeah.
So the paintings are the backgrounds to Othello's creative universe. And that in itself is what we are here to discuss, his creative universe. Going on the back of that, what is a memory to you, Othello? Give us an idea of what a memory is to you.
So memory can be many things. It's things that you've been through in your life. I think it's things that you've been through in your life. That's a memory. Relationships with people, relationship with objects, various things, I'd say.
Do you want to give us an example of?
So I would say, looking at this work was in contrast to my photography work. This work is much more, when the photography work is much more about, it's about the subject, it's planned, and it's heavily researched before I actually execute the project. I would say the paintings is much more getting in touch more with my emotions. This is why we call it the cataloging emotions, because it is a visual diary. It's like a visual diary of my life and different emotions and different ways I feel. So this is much more getting in touch with that inner self through this work and what I'm feeling at the time. And then I execute it through the paintings. And yeah.
Okay, let's talk about this smaller piece.
So this one.
The smallest piece in the show. It's a very interesting piece for me. It reminds me of sort of thing in the turn of the century someone like Malevich was doing in Russia. Those Russian formalists with their ideas of blackness and black being the ultimate, black being the highest form of artistic expression for them. But your work, black is also...
It's the underlining for everything.
It's the underlining for everything. We're both kind of wearing elements of black and white today in relation to that in an aside, because it's an interesting way of conceiving colour and understanding where and what it signifies. Because this year we have had a whole set of events that have necessitated the use of black. People being in mourning, and also people's skin colour being used as the primary motive for certain things. Hence why we always associate black with heavy issues. It's a colour of standardization also. It's something that is ubiquitous. It's almost like a universal.
But on the other hand, could be seen as ostentatious, because you look at the black cars and black clothes are used for the evening. So it has this other meaning to it as well, at the same time as the other meaning. And I think that black always appears in my work. And if you look at the photographs, they're quite dark. And you're talking about this particular picture. So this particular picture painting, I was in China in December. And I remember I kept seeing blue and green everywhere. And at some point, every place I turned, I kept seeing blue and green. And for some reason, I was drawn to this blue and green and the underground in symbols that I was seeing around. I remember at one point I photographed, as if I did this presentation, I actually photographed a blue, a red, and a green symbol that was on the underground. And then when I came back to London, I couldn't let it go. So I think it was like January, beginning of the year, I started painting with this image in my mind of this green and red that I kept seeing everywhere when I was in Shanghai. And it just kept playing on my mind, and I kept playing, and I just thought, I wanted to explore it. So again, it was talking about the emotion. It was something that it evoked something with me which I couldn't let go. I photographed it and then went into the studio and then executed this painting based on this thing that kept coming up and I kept seeing everywhere.
So give us an idea as to what usually sparks that. Is it just colour that sparks these memories? Or
no, it's a deeper emotion. I feel something, like at the moment I'm about to start a new painting this weekend, and that was based on, which I also did a film about it. So I started with filming this tree, but this was based on this during the lockdown. I spent a lot of time looking at this tree outside my window, which sparked this sort of calmness within me. And it became my place of, it was, how can I say it? It was almost like meditative for me when I was looking at this tree, and calm in effect. And it just made me still all the things that was going around at the time during the lockdown. That was just a calm in effect looking at this tree. So I had a relationship with this tree, and so I filmed the tree for the piece. And now I'm going to paint it, do a painting based around this tree. So again, it was this connection with this tree and this connection, this emotion and this feeling of calm during this period that's influenced this painting. And it's similar to the two paintings we're going to show soon. There was a painting before the lockdown, and I was doing like everybody else, running to loads of openings. And I had an interest in brutalist architecture, so I do spend a lot of time running around, and I'm always stopping. One of the things that stops me is architecture, interiors, so I'm always photographing them. And if you see the painting before the lockdown, which is quite heavy, and it's like, so the painting, which is the last painting I did, which was 2016, after the lockdown, there's a sense of calmness, and that's a sense of how I was feeling as a person during that lockdown, this calmness, and after it, not wanting things to return to normal, and actually loving the kind of quietness of London and the stillness of life, and having time to reflect on myself and my work instead of always running around and never having time to reflect. There was this great sense of reflection and pause, and not having to say that I'm making work or I'm going to this opening. It was actually a time for me to look at the work I've made before and actually think about what I'm going to do in the future, but also to catch up with myself.
I wanted to just pick up on that and really understand better what you mean by pausing.
Yeah, because one of the things of being an artist is that every time you meet someone, the first thing they ask you, what are you working on now? And you feel that you have to respond to that by saying, oh, I'm doing something, or I'm working on something. I think during this period, I had conversations with friends who were trying to still have these old conversations, and I felt really comfortable saying, I'm doing nothing right now. And I'm enjoying this time just to really just reflect and take time out from that and not have that pressure of saying, I'm making a piece of work or I'm working on the project. And that's what I meant by the pause. But it also gave me a chance to do some reading, look at some films, and understand the kind of work that I want to make maybe in the future, but also reflect on the work that I've made in the past.
What is your idea of your history? And what is your past? Where does that sort of stem from?
The past? In what terms?
In terms that you said just now that you've had some time to look at your history and where you've come from and where you're heading. What is your idea of sort of conceptualizing time, and what is your idea of history, and what is your idea of relating in relation to
in terms of history? I do mean in terms of history for my work, because I was like,
be more specific. Let's start with your work history.
Okay, so I was a person that I'm constantly on it all the time. I'm a person who sleeps late. I'm always coming up with ideas. I'm constantly coming up with ideas. I don't really take time to pause and step back. And I think this is one of the things that this period was able to do, because, we're always running around, especially in London, running from opening, running from work, in the studio. And there's never a moment of stopping and just saying, I want to stop, and just take in and observe everything around you, or even appreciating the aspects of your life, or how much you achieved in your life. I think that time was fantastic for that.
So we've now got to the point where we're discussing lockdown as being one of the most pivotal parts of your life and your practice. But indeed, you started this work before lockdown.
Yes, right. So like I said to you, this work, when I thought about it, it was like cataloging emotions. It's a series of emotions that I go through. So I go into the studio and I have this, maybe it came from a dream, maybe I'm feeling something at that particular time. And then I get into the studio and then I'll execute this piece of work through music.
So the execution of work through music is something quite interesting, because in a lot of your work, you do have a rhythm to it. The reason why I decided to bridge the photography with the new studies series, which is the paintings, is because they work in tandem. To understand one, you need to know the other. So would you like to give us an idea about how you work in
both mediums? In
both mediums as by means of association?
By means of association, I could also say that we all have different aspects of ourselves. And I think this is one of the things we'll be able to use my creativity, was to explore the different sides of myself, but they are all connected. So like I said, with the photography, what I do in photography is I work on projects, and they're usually long-term projects where I do a lot of research, and I really enjoy the research before I actually make the project. So there's a whole process going through on that side. And so my photography projects, they take normally sometimes up maybe a year before anything actually happens. There is one video project I'm working on now. I've been working on it for 3 years. I'm ready to shoot now, but it's just I don't have the funding to do the project. But with the painting side, it's much more immediate because I'm responding to an emotion. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there is a different kind of research. It's like a visual research that I'm doing with the paintings, and then I go through it. I execute it comes from emotions inside, and trusting those inner emotions. And sometimes it's frustrating. Sometimes I get frustrated. Sometimes I walk away. But these paintings don't normally take a few months. One of the paintings that took 2 years. Because I go through a series of kind of frustrations when I'm doing these paintings. Sometimes it flows, sometimes it doesn't, which is completely different to the photographic and the film side, where everything is completely planned. So once I get to the stage of making, I completely know what I'm actually doing. I know exactly what I'm doing before I start doing the making side.
Okay. This is a pattern. Let me.
So that's the 2-year one.
Let me just share this. This work took 2 years, you were saying?
Yeah, so I started this in 2000. I think it was the end of 2017, and I kept coming back to it. And I would put it away, then come back to it, and I just kept building the layers. And I think it was something nice about that because I just didn't want to rush this one, and I wasn't sure. And then one part the red was coming out too much, and then there was something else, and I built more layers. And it wasn't until like 2019 that I actually felt that it was ready. I just wanted to see how far I can go with it. So I was just working at different periods of about 2 years.
Give me an idea as to what might motivate you to not have an end point for this one.
Well, I think that relates again to the photography. My work, I really don't have to. I don't feel like I need to rush. In the sense of really understanding what I'm doing. So time for me is time. I don't, I don't have to say I have to make a piece of work by next month. It takes as long as it takes to make a piece of work till I feel comfortable with that piece of work.
So time for you is plastic in the same way that art is almost a plastic entity because it's moldable into something that you want. That you would want to do, in the sense that it's moldable in the way that you can always put onto it whatever you want to get out, in essence.
Yeah, and I think what I want to get out of that comes through the process because you have an idea of what you want to. You have a rough idea through these emotions that I'm going through when I'm creating the work. But then how it turns out, it might come out completely, allow that freedom it might change course. So although I'm literally relying on that inner thing inside, which is guiding me through making that work.
What is that inner thing?
It's like it's emotion. It's what I'm feeling. Whatever I'm feeling at that particular moment when I'm making that piece of work.
Give us an idea of what you usually feel when you're creating.
It depends on the day. It depends on the day, I must admit. Like I said, the other practice of mine, which is the third, that is a project that is working on, which I have a project in mind and I work on that project with the paintings. I can never say what I'm going to be creating next week. So right now I know that I have this idea in my head, which is this green and this black. And that stemmed from the tree and also from this tree that became like a meditation for me, watching this tree during that period. So I have that in my mind. And then I remember going to Hyde Park during this period because Central London was very quiet. So I found Central London the quietest place to go to rather than going to the suburbs. So just sometimes walking in Hyde Park with bare feet and actually planting my feet on the grass, which is something that I want to explore when I'm actually doing this new painting. I want to try it with my feet. I'm going to use a leaf from this tree and then different materials to create this painting.
So this is the piece in its entirety, and it's Do you want to share the memory that you were working through?
It was this one. This one was a complete loads of memories, whereas this one was like over 2 years. It was like I just kept going with it. So at one point I was feeling very much in this red. I wanted this really powerful red to come through, and it changed, and I was feeling the textures. So this was like an ongoing visual diary of everything. This one, compared to the rest, this was just continue, and just see how far I could stretch it.
Oh wow!
And I should never forget conversations as well. So conversations plays a big part as well. So, you got lots of just research from reading. It was research by looking at data galleries. There's also research through conversations with various people, which does take that has a certain influence on some of the work that I do as well.
So what are you stretching here?
Am I stretching?
Because you said you...
No, I'm not stretching everything. I tell you, this piece, when I'm doing the painting, it's totally trusting those emotions and trusting the feelings and allowing yourself to let go. Whereas when I'm doing the photography and I'm doing the film work, I am very, very, very structured. It's like I'm controlling everything. When I go to the execution stage, I know exactly what I'm going to do. Whereas the paintings, I can only say to you what I'm feeling and how I might execute it, or what comes out of it could be something completely different to how I started.
So let's talk about this piece.
So this was just after a breakup in 2018, and literally went into the studio and just started pulling things over a period of time. Was pulling things together, but it was always subconsciously. So this was a subconscious painting that was coming from something from based on this this relationship breakup. But I didn't consciously go there to do the painting based on the relationship. But I think it came out while I was in the studio, and I was feeling things. So it was a case of I was just, if you're in that moment when it's almost like you're in a you leave your
chance.
Yeah, you leave that your conscious mind. So they got the subconscious mind. And you're doing it, and then things are coming together, and then when you step back, you realize that all of this relates to this thing that was going on at that time. And then some people said to me that they've seen a body in this piece of work, but I remember etching out a body and then adding materials to it. But I think I was driven by this relationship breakup, but not going to the painting, so I'm going to make a painting about it. I just started doing this painting, but I think I was reflecting back to that subconsciously. I was making this painting.
Okay. Let's go on to some of the photography you might have spoken about. I've scrolled back up there whilst I do this and try and find photography, do you want to tell us about how you started off with masculinity? Give us your memory or your emotions around.
Oh yeah, so the masculinity project was questions about myself, obviously being a black male, and questions about how people have always tried to put you into a box. So it's like ownership of yourself, how people try to want to put, let's say, like the ownership of you. So instead of meeting the person who's in front of you, and this could be meeting a black or a white person, how they put their stamp on you without getting to know the person. So I've always had to deal with that all my life. So it's like I dress in a particular way. I like one of the things that I've always had people thinking that, are you gay because of the way I carry myself? But that's just because people put a stamp on you because you have to be a certain person or in a certain box. All the things that, most black men go through, living in London, where people, like, for example, going into a shop and someone's like following you around and somebody's putting their stamp on you again and not seeing you for the person who's just standing in front of you. So, and I think masculinity started from there, and dealing with my own masculinity in places like the barbershop, which I find a place that I don't feel comfortable in. It's very hyper masculine. I like to start performing a role that's not me. And then I started exploring other men's masculinity, asking men about themselves. Then after I did a couple of series, I reverted it back to myself, thinking about my own masculinity and how I've had to deal with that all my life. The conversations around, you meet a group of guys and it's automatically, do you like football and what team do you support? And these conversations, and you fall into this formative role as a male, which I've never been really comfortable with because And then it carried on from there. Then I got to the north of England, photographing men in the north of England, spent a year traveling in the north of England, asking northern men about their masculinity, and then came back to London again and did it with men who work in the city.
So give us an idea about the difference between the men who work in the city and the men who used to work down.
Oh, I can sum it up really quickly on this one. So the men who work, some men in north of England, which I found spending time up there, it was much more about community and family. When I interview men in London, and I shouldn't say it's all men in London, but the men that I've interviewed, it's much more about self. We're in the north. One of the key differences I noticed was community and family, whereas London was more self.
Okay. Give us an idea of how you sit between self and,
it's interesting.
family. How do you sit?
I'm a family person.
In terms of like work, I mean like.
I don't. What do you mean in terms of like family and?
No. I meant in the sense that how do you sit between work-wise between creating a family which is someone which can be like a work family, or do you have like a?
Well, I kind of keep it separate. I have my family and not my family. I don't have a family. I have parents and I have siblings and I have in London, and that's my kind of off days when I spend time with my family. That's me. That's my off time.
That's your off time.
Yeah.
So you have an off time.
With the family, it's like sometimes it's just nice to be present with family. We could be so occupied with with our lives and what we're doing, and not be present. So when I'm with family, it's like Sundays when I usually go to my parents. It's like it's my off time. It's me to just be present with them and present. Yeah.
So I know that meditation and also yoga is something that you do very often, and presence is something very courted at. Do you want to speak a little bit how?
Well, no, it's
also a meditative process.
Well, I think for most artists, I think for me, it is. It's when you get into the studio, it is like a meditation. Once you're in that zone. Even when I am photographing, I did something recently when I was doing a project, and someone tried to interview me during that interview, and it was probably one of the worst, most uncomfortable interviews I had. I just wasn't relaxed because I was in that meditative zone, within that zone of doing the work, and then trying to switch back into having a conversation with somebody, an interview. Well, I found that very difficult because I was in that state of mind when I was in the work.
You were in work mode.
Yeah.
Give us. I know that you mentioned that it was difficult to get the men sometimes in masculinity series to open up to you. Do you want to discuss a little bit about that? Because you yourself.
Let's go back to the paper. Yeah. Let's get okay. Yeah. Yeah, because obviously, it's like I tried to get men in the first series, and a lot of the men were, just when you discover things about men, when men talk about aging and body shapes and body consciousness, and things that men don't really hear men talking about a lot. But a lot of the times, it's like, do I need to work out? I'm old, and conversations like that, and these insecurities came up that you don't normally associate with men during that project.
Okay, going back to the painting, and I really do mean this, but the relationship between the work behind us and all of the different works, this work seems to be like a synthesis work, where you bring together all of the different colours that are present in your work. So, for example, black is something very precious. The abject blackness is very, very precious in your work. But it's also complemented with the red and the yellows and the greens.
Well, if you look at the studio, it's like I do have all the photographs on the left-hand side of the studio, not consciously separating the work. But sometimes when I'm actually painting, I'm actually looking at the photographs. So particularly this particular one here, and this one on the you can't see it, but it's the one on the left of us. If you can bring it up, go anyway. You can't. This one, someone's to the left of us right now. sometimes I'm looking at the photographs when I'm painting. There it is. So I was looking at there's a photograph called Before the Last Moment, which you'll bring up in a minute. The one to the left, just by the side of you. I was actually looking at Before the Last Moment when I was painting. Before the Last Moment is there. It's the one down, Catalogue Emotions, 19th. That's what's up there. That one. So no, it's not there. Okay, can't see that one. Is it on there? This one. Anyway, so that was. I was actually looking at the photograph where I was painting. I think there it is. There it is. That one. There we go.
So you're looking at this photograph?
I was looking at this one, yeah.
Which is the one
so this was influencing me.
The left, not the one on the right.
The one on the left. So even though the emotion around that was I was thinking about the storm. I think I was in one of those things, when you're like, everything's going on and there's a storm inside of you. But I started to remember this painting and thinking about this was done in the summertime. So I remember looking at this, using that as a reference as I was painting this painting.
Amazing. So just bringing this section of the live together, really, and tying it up. The show has been a bridge between the photography and has been a bridge between the photography and the new paintings. The new paintings have a life of their own, but not completely divorced. The study series is not completely divorced from the older paintings, the older portraits.
We should show the last one as well, because the last one was really, I think the last one really sums up how you play with the emotions, because this was the first painting I did when I went back into the studio. The studio opened up again in May, but I don't think I went to the studio until
this one?
Yeah. So I didn't visit the studio until August. I popped in, but I wasn't ready to go back to the studio as yet. And I think I went back into the studio in August, end of August.
Give me the story.
This is what I'm saying. This is the one, because the studio opened up again in May. I think it was May or June the studio opened again. I popped in there maybe once during that period, and I just wasn't ready to go back to the studio. And then I went back to the studio properly. I think it was towards the end of August, towards the end of August. And I started doing the base for this painting and finished it in September. But this is a great reflection of what I was talking about earlier on, that stillness, that beautiful sky when we had during the lockdown. And again, I did see this photograph of this beautiful beach in my friend's studio, where I took a photograph of it. So that was in my mind. Then the sky and that whole period. So that was the first painting after lockdown.
It's almost like to end on a note of hope. You were looking at a new dawn, a new beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
A new start, and you're looking at how you feature in that sublime moment that is also one that cannot be, in essence, replicated. And this is a memory, this is a body. It's a body of water, it could be a cloud, it could be
many things. Yeah.
It could be many things. Great. I think if
should I open up to questions?
Yeah, we're going to open up to questions. So we're going to now open it up to questions. I'm going to unmute you all. So if you'd like to ask any questions, you're more than welcome to jump in.
Hi, Ed. Ella.
Hey, Ella.
Yeah.
Hey, I just wanted to ask, so the series, you said, how long did it take you with the painting series from start to finish? And like sort of the duration of how long the project took?
It wasn't a project. I just carried on painting. So they probably started in the first one in this series, probably about 2017. Probably 2000. Let me think about it. When I went to the studio, so I had I think 2017, I think, maybe. 2017. It started from there.
Mm.
Hmm.
So,
Um,
go
oh,
on.
sorry, I just wanted to ask as well. So, going forward, how is your practice evolving, like currently, in this present moment? Like after completing the paintings and actually displaying them and seeing how they've been received and talking about it. Like where,
Paintings will continue. I'm about to start a new one next week. I just finished a film, which is going to be shown in December, which is a video art piece. And I just keep making work and keeping involved as as new ideas come up. I'm about to work on a new piece once this COVID's over, which is called Silent Key Holders of Power, and it's based on female-male relationships, which is a photography piece with 50 dancers. So I've already got that in my head. I've got to raise the funding, it's £6,000 to do that project. I've got a video art project that I want to work on called Fathers and Sons, and then the paintings will just continue because it's something that I don't need to plan. I don't need people. I can just continue doing them. So that will keep on going.
so it's more about the idea is it comes before the medium, like the medium that you use kind of follows through with the idea, or it kind
I
of
would say so, definitely.
okay.
It's something to lend itself to video art. Silent Key Holders of Power is definitely a photographic piece because the way I want to photograph it and how I see it and I visualize it already is definitely a photographic piece. The painting and the feet and leaves is definitely a painting because how I'm feeling and the way I want to work with using my feet and using the hands and not using a paintbrush apart from the base, that's definitely itself to a painting. And then the one I want to do with Fathers and Sons, which is a 3-year project, which I came up with the idea about 3 years ago, and then I've been interviewing loads of Fathers and Sons. That's definitely a video art piece. Again, I have to raise the funding for the project.
Well, all the best with it. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Anna. John, do you want to ask the question?
Sure, why not? So I'm interested in this thing about hopping between mediums and the level of premeditation and planning, because you say that you don't need to plan the paintings, but on the other hand, you've also said you've got one cooking for this weekend, and that's actually probably quite an unusual way of working for a painter. I mean, here we are on Tuesday, and you're saying, right, I've got one for this weekend. Like, how does that look like?
That's interesting, John, because I could have started a few weeks ago, but I wasn't ready. Because I'm still playing with that emotion and developing it inside. So maybe you are right. It's not in the same way planning with like the photography, but it's more planning to have that right kind of in the right mood. So like I'm saying this weekend, but I've been saying that for the last few weeks because I haven't been ready as yet.
Right.
And I'm feeling that this weekend is the one. The mainly way this one I have to say this weekend because I have a deadline because it was the back of a commission, this one. So I know I have to start it soon. But usually you're right, the planning is more that it's like, I can't explain it. The photography is more like in the video, it's planning with research, but this is an emotional research. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think there's a difference, isn't there, between planning and knowing you're ready and knowing yourself. Like I thought what you were saying about what you took from the pause was really, I think I was quite struck by your quite high level of emotional wisdom and maturity to say, actually, I was happy just to tell people I'm not working anything and I'm very comfortable with that. Because I think one thing that a lot of us have found quite hard to process is actually enjoying a bit of this incredibly terrible moment and actually finding something positive in it. You feel kind of guilty, don't you? Like very conflicted, because obviously it's just a horrific moment for human history. But on the other hand, there is this opportunity to realize that something wasn't quite working before. And what you've described about always feeling the pressure to be somewhere and to justify yourself, I think a lot of us felt that. And so it's that interesting split at the moment, like wrestling with that slight level of guilt, but also taking something from it as well.
And I think that's one thing being an artist, you're always having that level of guilt because, people will call you and say, what are you doing today? And if I'm not, I do teach sometimes. And then they're saying that, no, I'm actually just taking some time out to understand. You always have that guilt trying to apologize for like, not, which was some people would see it as a luxury, which actually is not. It's actually part of your work to go and see an exhibition during the day, and you have that sometimes have that guilt. But I felt during this period it was great to actually something to think and actually say to people, you know what? And I still had that pressure because people were still calling again, what are you working on? When are you going to get back to the studio? And I was like, I'm not ready. I just don't want, and I think it was that period that gave me that confidence to say, do you know what? And then speaking to other artist friends who were also going through that, saying, I just want to pause. And I had some friends who didn't do nothing during that period. And some people just slept through that period. And I thought that was great because it was like, we don't need to put ourselves all this constant pressure and justify what we're doing. It's like, you know, I remember one time a friend of mine said to me, he moved to Barcelona, and he said one of the beautiful things about living in Barcelona that he actually saw people sitting on park benches or on benches on the street. Whereas if you did that in London, people would think you're lazy if you're doing that in the middle of the day. And that was the one thing he took about living in Barcelona for a year, that people just sat on the bench sometimes during the day, which seems very simple. But for him, it was like, if he did that in London, he would feel very guilty for sitting on the bench.
Yeah.
During the day.
I think.
Thanks, guys.
No, you're welcome, John and Anna. I might sit down now and do a little bit of tidying up loose ends. So what have we discussed today? In your mind, we've spoken about your emotions and how they relate to the paintings that are the central point of this current solo show. We've spoken about the photography and how those elements are interlinked. We spoke about tangentially some of the inspiration that may have come from life events.
Do you know what just came to my mind?
What?
How I can link some of these projects is vulnerability, and you're allowing yourself to be vulnerable and admitting that sometimes you're, because I think with the masculinity project, that was very much about showing male sensitivity, masculinity, the vulnerability, masculinity. And the same way John was asking about this thing about being maturity to say, I want to take time out. And I think there's a sense of being honest with ourselves and in the same way masculinity is performance, in the same way in our work lives and our daily lives, it's also performance. So we're performing in a work world to say, yeah, we can keep going, but actually sometimes there's something that it's not right. And I think during this period, what John said is something wasn't really right, but we were aware of it, but we were going along with it. Almost again, like a performance again.
Do you think that the normal that we were looking at before COVID hit was unsustainable?
Yes, completely. Because we talk about people with mental health, we talk about depression, we talk about, and that's been going on. If you look at masculinity, it's to do a lot with mental health amongst men. But you think about it, even not just talking about masculinity, which is performance. If you look what John was saying about how wisely you run it, it's also performance. So we play into these roles, and then something wasn't quite right because this constant working and having to, strive for this next level up, something's not right about it.
It's a very capitalistic model that you start on the bottom end of the treadmill and you're trundling up all the way to the top of the mountain. Once you get to the top of the mountain, you realise there's nothing there to you.
And it's physically draining.
It is physically draining.
But we all keep performing this performative role, and obviously we need stability. The
performance of success is more.
Yeah, and I think we all want. There is that, which I found in the masculine point, the thing called the gold standard that we're all maybe aiming for, but at the same time, is the toll that it takes on us. And I think
to get there.
Yeah, and I think this period was lovely. And I think there's a guy who came on Saturday who runs his own business and he works in the city, and he came with his partner. And he said to me he actually just enjoyed playing with his daughter, and he felt guilty for it, but in a way, he actually got time to take off. Instead of working till whatever time and coming from the office late, he was finishing work at like 3 o'clock maybe, and playing with his daughter. And he said he did feel guilty about it, but it was beautiful to actually spend that time with his daughter. And I think that sort of sums up everything for me.
On that note, I would like to thank you all for joining us. Do you want any questions?
I don't know if they've got any more questions to ask.
Well, okay. I was gonna wrap up, but I'll ask John and Allah. If you have any more points, please raise them now, or do forever hold your peace. No?
Yeah, just wanted to say thank you. It's been really nice watching. Emmy's here, by the way, as well.
Hello.
But yeah, yeah, it's been interesting learning more about your practice and linking your practice to your being vulnerable and talking about your emotions as a man as well, because like you said, masculinity is performative, and these toxic ideas that men kind of feed into when growing up, like, and saying that you have to be hard and all these things, and it's important to be open as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it. That's all. Yeah.
So I would like to wrap up then, if that's all. John, any more sentiments? No.
I'm good, thanks.
So wrapping up, cataloguing emotions has been an exploration of a world which Othello has been gathering through his travels through life. So there's been a bit of architecture.
And they can go into the sound piece if they want to. There's something French in Italy.
A little bit of sound. He's also become a sampler recently.
If you want to see that, you can go to the.
You should spell it.
Yeah. So if you want to get an example of the sound piece and the film piece, there's another exhibition, the Offshoot Gallery, which is on until the 31st, which is more sound and video.
Yeah. It's been a catalogue of non-errors from us tonight. And we'd just like to thank you all for your different levels of involvement. I would like to thank the Copy Project.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to Sophia and Miguel, who are busy working right now as we're talking, breaking down the show.
Allowing us to have
and Rebecca and everybody, all the team at Copy Project, thank you very much for this show.
Yeah, and moreover, I would like to thank Othello for having allowed me the opportunity to curate his work, which has been an absolute pleasure. Getting to know the work that is, I think, at the cutting edge of understanding of selfhood and the propulsion of ideas around what masculinity is, what being a person is in this time and age where all we do is interrogate. I wrote down the idea of the crit as your lecturer, and it's been a constant crit, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Life has been a constant crit.
Yeah.
And now we're on an extended summer holiday without the weather and without being able to go out in the way that we wish to. But moreover, it still isn't a holiday, and I realise that because that was a bit of a bad analogy, but I think you can follow my drift. It's a time in which we can spend to expand our minds and really grow within our practices, be that accounting beans, or be that, as is Othello's case, being a painter, polymath extraordinaire. Well,
thank you to you as well. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.